it is my honor and pleasure to give you a brief overview as to some of the commercial and charter party considerations when we're coming into 2020. Now, as everybody here would be quite aware of, come 1st of January 2020, Mapple Annex 6 regulations will be amended to impose a maximum sulphur emission cap of 0.5%. The present cap is at 3.5%, and to many people, I think the first immediate question would be, who's responsible for ensuring compliance with Mapple? Now, I think the simple answer to that would at first glance be with the ship owners. But at the same time, I think that it might well be a very simplistic answer in many situations, simply because we have a history of having many long-term charter parties, which would have been concluded well before 2020, and which were originally intended to go well after 2020. And in some of these charter parties, there might not have been as much thought given at the time when you were concluding these charter parties into what would happen in the event of such a change in Mapple regulations. During the course of this talk, I will be covering, right, in quite general terms, some of the issues which would arise and which both owners and charterers should be aware of. Now, this is such a big issue that we could spend the entire day or so talking about this, and my intention here is just to do a very quick overview, hopefully to bring home a few takeaway messages for everybody. Now, I think this slide down here demonstrates that there are a few areas which we need to look at or which we need to concern ourselves with whenever we have a change in bunker specs, including bunker sulfur emission levels. The first one would probably be that there will be an increase in bunker quality issues. Now, this arises simply because at this point in time, there really isn't any certainty that there will be compliant bunker fuel, okay, available in mass volumes around the world. Okay? What you will have is a very likely situation where vessels going to more isolated ports would have limited options as to the types of bunkers that would be available. It may not be the case that at every port there will be 0.5% sulfur fuel in the form of IFO. There might be situations where owners may have no choice but to resort to hybrid blends. Now, some of these hybrid blends of fuels do not comply with the current ISO 8217 specifications. So therein lies the potential for bunker quality issues to arise. The next point to consider, of course, will be bunker price changes. Currently, I think there is speculation for compliant low sulfur fuel is that it will cost about in excess of $500 per metric ton come 2020. Now that's about a $200 to $400 difference between what is expected to be the price for your, I would say, your traditional high sulfur fuel, which has a sulfur content of 3.5%. And of course, you know, in any sort of charter party contract, there is always going to be a big consideration as to how much or how little, right, a charterer will have to spend in order to supply fuel. Well, for that matter, also for a ship owner who is pretty much using the ship for his own purposes. Now, the third point is related to the first point, which is fuel availability issues. Again, the big question is whether or not there will be compliant fuel in the various areas that the vessel is required or employed to. A large percentage of the charter parties that we see usually call for voyages to, I would say, slightly difficult areas in many parts of the world. Now, in terms of long-term charter parties, the position is probably not helped by the fact that you will have typically a worldwide trading clause, which means that you could pretty much go to just about anywhere under the sun, right? Which you can possibly navigate to. Again, very self-evident point there. Now, which leads down to the next point, which is if there's no available fuel, then doesn't this curtail on the tradability or the employability of the ship? Again, something to look out for. Next, the different types of available fuels will mean that there is likely to be more operational issues in terms of cleaning bunker tanks, right? I think all of us here are probably familiar with the dangers of commingling bunkers of different types and grades. That danger is probably going to be more, I wouldn't say aggravated, but it's going to be more on top of people's minds when you're dealing with different types of fuels which are available on the market. Now, all these leads to more costs and, of course, the potential for more disputes. So I guess the question is, would you need to change some of the charter party or contractual clauses? I suppose the answer is yes. Just to give a quick example. Oops. There we go. Now, currently, in perhaps maybe 99% of the charter parties that we come across, you will only have two definitions for fuel oil. Okay? Low sulfur fuel oil and high sulfur fuel oil. Low sulfur fuel oil is commonly accepted to be fuels of below 0.1% sulfur content, pretty much for use in ECAs. High sulfur fuel, right, is anything above 0.1% up to the current global cap of 3.5%. Now, what's going to happen in 2020? What's going to happen is that in practice, it's likely that the market's probably going to have a wide variety of fuel types available. So you're going to have a situation where you have a requirement for 0.1% sulfur content fuel to be used in ECAs, and you have another level, a cap of 0.5% sulfur content for everywhere else. And on top of that, you still have the current category of high sulfur fuel, which is then going to be anywhere between 0.5% sulfur content and above. Now, this last category of fuel is probably going to be meant for vessels with equipped scrubbers on board. So, as things go, you probably are going to get some potential for confusion with the different types of bunker grades being made available on the market. Takeaway for the day? Well, I think you probably know it by now. Start thinking about what you're going to do about your charter party definitions. Are there going to be any other charter party clauses that need to be changed? Yeah, probably so. I think with the different types of fuel available, you're also going to be concerned about the costing of the types of fuel available, as well as the obligations of the parties in relation to fuel. Now, the classic example to this is probably going to be redelivery bunkers. You know, where you have a long-term charter which starts out pre-2020, right? The vessel's probably going to be delivered with high sulfur fuel oil of 3.5%. If that charter party extends into 2020, what's going to happen? Is the vessel going to be redelivered with the same quality of high sulfur fuel oil, okay, and the same quantities? But at the same time, and we all know that there's going to be a prohibition come March 2020 on the continued carriage of heavy fuel oils on board non-scrubber equipped ships. So what can the charterer do? quick example. These terms are usually very common in most charter parties. She's delivered with about 620 tons of heavy fuel oil, high sulfur fuel oil, costs about $400 per metric ton. You usually have standard clauses in your charter parties that talk about redelivery with about same quantities and prices on both ends. So what's going to happen at the time of redelivery in an ordinary situation is that the charter is going to be crediting or given credit for the same amount of fuel. In this particular example, the value of that fuel is $248,000. Now, if you look at the next example, all right? Oops. Come 2020, right? If high sulfur fuel is defined as fuel oil with a maximum sulfur content of 0.5%, if you work out the mechanics yourself, right, you'll find that the ship owner is pretty much paying more. Sorry, the charter is paying more, okay, just to redeliver the ship with compliant fuel. If your terminology is for high sulfur fuel is that it's just fuel, any fuel above 0.5% sulfur content, then, charterer benefits because he has to pay about $93,000 less. So these are important considerations for you to bear in mind. Okay? Next important consideration, of course, is bunker specifications. Now, it's an ongoing thing, bunker specifications. Earlier this year, we had Houston bunkers, which is also a bunker quality issue. Come 2020, we're going to have another issue which deals with sulfur content. The interesting thing about 2020 is that insofar as ISO 8217 is concerned, it's unlikely to be amended until after 2020. So you're going to get into this slight state of limbo where your Mapple Annex 6 doesn't really gel very well with ISO 8217. Okay. Now, bunker quality issues will then lead to delays, simply because you're not sure whether or not the bunker quality that's supplied by the charterers or by the bunker suppliers are compliant. There may be potential breaches of Mapple in the event that you don't comply with Annex 6. And of course, your usual disputes with off-spec bunkers. Now, moving on, you have other clauses to review. Performance warranties, okay? Right, your current performance warranties are based on the vessel consuming IFO and MDO. What happens when you consume hybrid fuels? Right? So big question mark down there, something for you to consider. Trading clauses, we've covered that before. Bunker tank and system cleaning requirements. Now, there's going to be a switch, right? And it's probably not going to happen overnight. The big question for owners and charters to think about is, who bears the cost for cleaning the bunker tanks so as to receive compliant fuel? Okay. The next few points, waste removal, dry dock, entitlement, and scrubbers. Now, they're all related to instances where a ship owner agrees or has decided to install a scrubber. Okay. Pretty much when you install a scrubber, it's new equipment, right? You've got to deal with what happens with the operation of the scrubber, okay? And also you have to deal with a question of taking the ship out of service for a specific period just to install the scrubber, which is very different from your ordinary type of dry docking situation, okay? Okay, most charter parties have dry docking clauses that talk about your usual, your annual dry docking or your 5-year special survey dry dockings. They don't usually cover, right, specific one-off events like the installation of scrubbers. So you've got to think about how you're going to provide for this. Finally, transfer to compliant fuel. Okay, again, it covers things like equipping the ship, right, and cleaning the tanks, such as to enable her to be able to receive and consume compliant fuel. Now, the key points at the end of the day, right, for you to take home from this particular overview is there is no single magic clause that's out in the market now dealing with all the consequences of 2020. BIMCO themselves have said that they're going to be publishing a couple of clauses dealing with 2020. Well, I can tell you now, right, that there are currently 2 draft clauses, right, in the pipeline. The first one is a sulphur content clause, right, and the second one would be a transition clause. Now, neither of these 2 clauses are ready yet. The earliest we can expect the first clause to come out will probably be next month. Okay. Right, so watch this space. There is also no real development in terms of clauses for the use, installation, and operation of scrubbers in charter parties. So it's a pretty new invention. It's a pretty new development. All right, the invention itself is quite old. And I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg now when it comes to how you protect both owners and charterers, right, in the event of the breakdown of a scrubber or in situations where certain areas or certain ports do not allow the use of scrubbers. Okay? It's also very important that it's also very important that we get close cooperation between both technical and chartering departments, and also I would suggest legal departments as well in terms of considering the various clauses and where you stand as an owner and ship owner. And I would say that if there's going to be any takeaway for today, it would be that for both ship owners and charterers, that thought be given now, right, as to how to engage with your contractual counterparties to ensure that there is minimal disruption, right, to operations come 2020. Okay? Thank you very much.